So the topics we are going to cover, we're going to cover a lot of information. We're going to cover a few current disability-related statistics. Kind of want to get your brain thinking about why employment is important to you. Some parent and caregiver concerns. How many parents do we have in the room? Okay. How many young people who want to go to work do we have in the room? All right. We're going to cover what it means to prepare for transition. That means that getting out of high school and going on to whatever the rest of your life looks like. We're going to cover something called WIOA, which is a federal law that provides a lot of different services while you're in school and after you leave school up to the age of 24. Life after high school. So what is your life going to look like after you leave high school? Your self-advocacy in college, if that's the road that you choose to go, what you need to do to get the services in college. So speaking up for yourself. And then lastly, we're going to end with, is employment really possible? And if you were here for the beginning of my spiel, you know that I think that employment is in fact really possible. And I do want to add one more note. The one unofficial thing on our list of objectives that I want to accomplish today is I want the parents and the young people in the room to exit this seminar with hope. Hope that you can be employed. Remember, I said in my introduction, the little spiel that's in your booklet, that I wanted you to come today and let's have a discussion about whether or not employment is really possible. I said something kind of fanciful about let's tilt at windmills together and dream the impossible dream. I want you to come with me and let's dream the impossible dream. And I say that it's the impossible dream because many times society says this is not a dream for you. You have a disability. This is not for you. Not employment, not for you. But just like this fictional character whose name was Don Quixote. This book was written in about 1600, so I know some of the young people are like, oh, too old. Meanwhile, Don Quixote believed in knighthood, and he believed in chivalry, like this behavior where you had this lady love and you did all these courtly, wonderful things for people, and you were the knight and you rode on your white horse and saved the day. He believed in all that. And the rest of society thought, oh, you are just so wrong. Well, so I want you to know that just because society says something, it doesn't mean that it's true, okay? So you can dream the impossible dream, which in this case would be employment. And I want to throw in a quote. This is from Christopher Reeve. As many of you may or may not know, he used to be Superman way back in the day, and then he had an accident. Right. And so once you choose hope, anything's possible. All right, so these are just kind of some things that you might hear me say. So just so you know, this is our alphabet soup. And IEP is your individualized education plan. Y'all probably know that one already. Then you've got your transition IEP. VR is vocational rehabilitation. The WIOA is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And an IPE, which is very similar, is an individualized plan for employment. All right, so remember, let me switch too far back up. All right, so before we get to employment statistics, like I said, this is kind of disability by the numbers. All right, so I put this up here, this federal poverty level, because this is determined every year by the Health and Human Services. This is the level that determines a lot of the different benefits programs and things that you can get. And the thing I want you to notice is this top number up here for a household of one, since I assume many of you, you might live as a family, so this would be the family of 2 and so forth. I want the parents to look at this number, this $12,140. That's per year, and I want you to think for just a minute. If you had to live on $12,000 a year with your current bills and your current lifestyle, could you do it?
No.
Right. Okay. So for our young people and our folks with disabilities that are living on SSI, we are asking them to live on less than that number. As a matter of fact, we are asking them to live on $771 a month, which translates to $9,252 a year. So that is less than what our federal government says that you need to be poor. Okay, so I just want you to take that in for just a minute as we're thinking about employment and what we're thinking about for our young people. So I bring up the employment statistics, and I know right now you're going, but that is so sad, and how could I think that my child is going to work if 8 in 10 people aren't even in the labor force? And in order to be in the labor force, you have to have been actively seeking employment within the last 4 weeks. And so I know that these numbers look harsh, but they are getting better. And I'm going to show you a way that they get even better. They get even better with education. As you can see going down this list, every time you increase your educational level, your ability to be employed increases. It may not be some big number that it jumps, but it does increase. So please think about school, and it doesn't have to be college. Not everything in life has to be about getting that 4-year degree. It can be about getting a trade certificate. Those trade certificates, you can make a lot of money doing those things. I hate paying that plumber when he has to come to my house because they charge by the hour and they don't just charge a little bit. So those are some things to think about. So when I'm saying school, I'm not necessarily just talking college. Think about trade certificates. Think about things that you are interested in. What things do you like? What does your child like? That might be something that they can do. And so the other thing to think about here is how self-determined is your child, or are you as a person with a disability? What I mean by that is how much are you able to make your own decisions? And although right now that might not sound super important, it's super important. A 1998 study found that 80% of those individuals who were highly self-determined, meaning they make their own choices a lot, are more likely to be employed than those people who have low self-determination. As a matter of fact, among those who were low self-determined, those who weren't making their own choices, only 43% of those individuals are employed. So the more we can get our kids to make those decisions and make those life choices for themselves, the better we're setting them up for all of their tomorrows. All right. So I know that the parents in the room have some concerns. You're concerned about what is going to happen to my child, right? What happens afterwards? I'm a parent too. I know what it is to have little guys and to be concerned about what is happening. So I want to take a few minutes and talk to you about some of your concerns. All right, sometimes we get concerned about benefits and what is going to happen to my child's benefits. And that's valid because some of our kids have some pretty involved needs and we need that medical care and we want that to continue. What I'm here today to tell you is that there are ways in which you can not only work, but also keep those benefits. And I'm going to give a plug to my coworker, Victor Panoff. He has a couple of workshops on Social Security and benefits. Please go see him because I'm not going to get super in-depth in this, because what I would tell you is that yes, I know about these programs, but I know about enough to get myself and you in some trouble. So, So I will give you a little bit of information, but if you have the time tomorrow, please go see Victor, because he can give you like the real in-depth information. He's a guru on this kind of stuff. What I can tell you is that in relation to Social Security, there is something called an impairment-related work expense. This is stuff that you as a person with a disability pay for and you need in order to be able to work, and have this disability. They can deduct that from the salary that you're bringing in. There are methods and ways that you can keep your Medicare for an extended period of time, and even later on after your eligibility runs out, or however you want to look at it, where you can buy into the program. And there are methods of also keeping your Medicaid, and it involves a variety of different forms. And like I said, Victor knows all about this and can tell you way more about it. What I can tell you is that there are ways, in fact, to keep it. But it also depends from disability to disability and how you qualified and different things like that. That's why I said I know about enough to tell you that there are programs, but I don't want to give you the wrong information. So please know that there are ways that your child can have their benefits and they can work too. So they get the best of both worlds in that instance.
Yeah, what was that exhibit called? Which booth was that?
It's not the Disability Rights Florida is our booth,
right?
But Victor Panoff is one of my coworkers. He has 2 or 3 different workshops tomorrow, and 2 of them are back to back. I think at 1 and 2, which talk specifically about benefits. So he can tell you a lot more about that. But also in relation to these benefits, there is a program out there called WIPA. It's Work Incentives Planning Assistance. These are people who are trained to know about benefits and can help you to know about benefits, how your benefits will be impacted by working, and they can run an analysis on your benefits and give you all this wonderful information. They can also help you with overpayment issues, and Disability Rights Florida can also help you with some overpayments issues so long as they are work related. And so this is what I was talking about. I kind of jumped ahead of myself a little bit, but there are also these things called special needs trusts and disability accounts, and I do think that probably there is an Able United rep out there who can tell you about an Able account where you can save money for your child, and your family members can also save some money for your child too. So, and those are funds, with the Able accounts that a person can access for a variety of different reasons, whether it's housing, transportation, a new iPad, just different things. But I will let the Able United people fully explain that, because once again, I don't want you to walk out of this room with some misinformation and then say, well, that lady from Disability Rights said. No, I did not say. And so, in relation to transportation, so there are a lot of different ways to gain access to transportation. And I say this as a person who does it every day, because I too also have a disability, and so I access this transportation every day to go to work, to go to the grocery store, to go out bowling or to the movies or whatever. Take my kids to the doctor, what have you. So there are methods to pay for transportation too. While you are in training or receiving services, in order to get to services or to access services, sometimes you have to get there, right? If I'm going to go to the doctor, with some exceptions, I would say, they're probably not going to come to me. Or to take your dog to the vet or what have you, you have to go, but not for the vet. But to access that's later. But to access the specific services that you're receiving from APD, DBS, or VR, they can pay for your transportation. They can do that by buying a bunch of bus vouchers for you. They can pay for a cab for you. They can give you a monthly check that says, here is your reimbursement for going to whatever, like I said, whether that's training or medical appointments that they are sponsoring. Now, APD has a little bit more flexibility and can provide you with a little bit more transportation service that doesn't necessarily have to be tied to an employment goal. You can use fixed route. That's the buses that come to the same stop every day at relatively the same time. You know, for places where a schedule is actually a schedule and not a suggested time of arrival. Then there are paratransit services. These are your door-to-door services, kind of like the transportation that your child might get in school where they come to your door and pick them up and take them to school. Well, this is going to be door-to-door transportation. You would call them on the phone the day before, and sometimes, you know, that's a real pain because you don't always know that you're going to need something, which is where the next ones come into play. But paratransit will come and pick you up and take you from wherever you are to where you're going, and you just schedule that at minimum 24 hours in advance. Now, some places I think may have a slightly higher time frame where you have to call in advance to get that set up, but check with your local paratransit, whatever that is. Paratransit does require an application, so you have to apply to get that service. They may ask for medical information as well in order to get that service. The emergency ride home. This is a program from the Florida Department of Transportation. It is for those cases where your boss comes in and says, hey, I really need you to work overtime. Is that all right? Or that they call from school and they're like, your child is sick and I need you to come get them right now. So you can access this service 4 times a year. You just have to be registered with the Department of Transportation and take transportation to from work on a regular basis. So let's say you're a bus rider every day and you know that bus stops at 6 o'clock, but you got to be at work until 8 o'clock. Well, you still need a ride home. Some other more flexible things, like I said, that moment when you're in the middle of making something and you're like, I do not have any sugar. And this cake is going to be super gross if I don't have any sugar. So you got to go to the grocery store. Well, you're trying to make it now. You don't want to wait till tomorrow. So you're not going to call and schedule a ride with paratransit. So your options then become getting a cab or a taxi or using a shared ride service like Lyft or Uber or something of that nature. And a lot of those things are building in more safety features. And there's a lot of more apps, but those are the 2 that I know about and the ones that I use on a pretty frequent and regular basis. So a lot of times parents and caregivers and all of us who love our people that we're around, we have some real concerns about somebody going into an integrated setting. I know that can be super scary. This is a new environment and you have people around your child that maybe you don't know or don't know about their disability. And so you're concerned about their safety. You're concerned about your child maybe fitting in and belonging in that place. There could be a lot of things that you're concerned about with that integrated setting. But while you're evaluating whether or not an integrated setting is right for you or right for your child, there are some things too that you need to know about the segregated settings. Segregated settings can at times breed isolation, meaning that you're away from other people. You might not talk to the person next to you. You're just away from other people. They're often located in these remote locations. They're away from transportation. The opportunities to be social may not be there. You don't know. You might be a super talkative person, and the person next to you may not be able to communicate, and it may not be something that they're working on. And so now here you are, and you want to talk to somebody so bad, and there's really nobody to talk to. So now you're all isolated, and you're not getting to be social, and that would be kind of not good. And sometimes isolation can lead to even a reduction in your skills, and sometimes even in your self-esteem, because everybody wants to have that human contact and to feel needed and belonging. And so the other thing too is, and I'll get into this a little bit more, as much as we would like to think that these facilities are super monitored and whatnot, they're not really. I just went to a seminar just yesterday where the Work and Hour Division, which is part of the federal government, who takes in these applications for segregated workshops, and they're like, multiple times during this seminar, they said, just because we approve the application does not mean that we are saying that they are a great place to be. We're saying they are compliant with what they put on the application. So they filled in all the boxes correctly. Therefore, because they filled in all the boxes correctly, we're going to give them our stamp of approval. They don't come in and necessarily look at it unless there is a complaint. And then they could and would do an investigation. And we do know that sometimes you are told by people that you trust and everything, this is a good setting for your child. We advise that this is what is right for your child. And the people who are telling you this probably have the best heart in the world, and that is not, they're not saying that to be malicious or anything else. But go do your own investigation, tour the facility, do what you need to do, make phone calls, talk to local groups or organizations like ours who know about these facilities, so that you know before you make that choice. And so what I'm saying is then this is a very VR term, which we will get to in a minute, is informed choice. Make an informed choice. Have the information before you make a choice. Preparing for transition. Abraham Lincoln said, "I will prepare, and someday my chance will come." So we're going to talk about being prepared so that one day you or your child's chance can come. So what do we do to prepare? We're going to begin with our IEP process, making sure that, you look, do I have a transition plan? What supports are in your transition plan? What are your diploma options? Because there's so many out there. So you might have an option for getting a merit or a scholar or deferred diploma option. So for the scholar one, according to, and I have resources in the back of this presentation, and this one comes specifically from a technical assistance paper with the Florida Department of Education that talks about diploma options. So please look at the link, check it out for yourself. But it specifically said that a scholar designation, you have to have 1 credit in Algebra 2, 1 credit in statistics, or an equally difficult math. So let me tell you from the beginning, that would already shoot me down if I were in high school, but that's okay. And then you have to pass the geometry statewide EOC, and in science, pass the statewide bio EOC, and have 1 credit in physics or chemistry, or again, some other equally difficult science, social studies, pass the U.S. history EOC, and have 2 credits of a foreign language and 1 elective in like an AP or a dual enrollment. For the merit, what you need to do is earn 1 or more industry certifications. And if you remember earlier on in our workshop, I said, don't just think when you're thinking about education after high school, it doesn't have to be college, although it could be. Those are options. Another one is to think about a trade. And while you're in high school, you can work on those trades and get these trade certificates so you can graduate and go out and get a job, because now you have a certificate. So guess what? Now you have a leg up on your classmates who did not get a certificate, and now they're just now starting their post-school journey. Meanwhile, you are going and getting that awesome job And while all your friends are poor college students eating ramen noodles, as we all were as college students, you have a job and you can say, look at me. So that's an option that you can do. You can also defer your diploma, and that is for an IEP student with special education needing transition planning and transition services, and goes to the age of 21. And like I said, that is all from the FDOE technical assistance paper, and I do have the link to it, so please, like I said, go and review that. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity, or WIOA, this was passed in 2014, and it relates to transition services. This relates to not only getting those services from vocational rehabilitation, but getting those services from your school. Your school is now responsible for making sure that you get those transition services, that you get those skills that you need to be able to go beyond high school and do what you need to do. Whether that is going to work or living independently, because that is so just as much a great option as, and you need to live independently anyway, even if you're going to work. So it's not necessarily one or the other, but they can provide all these services to you. They're also responsible for making sure that you get referred to vocational rehabilitation and getting those transition services from them. And that will also be career planning, career counseling, figuring out what it is that you want to do, because at the end of the day, it is about what you as the person with a disability wants to do and the choices that you want to make. And so we're going to jump back real quick to the transition IEP. It does begin at 14. It is results oriented. In other words, we want to have an end goal or an outcome. We want to have something we can measure and see what happens with it. It's designed to get you from school into post-school life. Like I said, whatever, that might look like for you. It's going to spell out all of your unique educational needs, all the supports that you're going to need, all your related services, your program accommodations, what agencies are going to be involved. And by the way, VR can and should come to these meetings. Having a counselor there to coordinate services. And if your child already has a VR counselor, you can invite them. But if not, the school is responsible for inviting them so that they can come and sit at the table and answer your questions about VR. Because how are you going to know what it is unless somebody kind of comes and talks to you about it? I can tell you right now, when I was growing up, we did not, in my little bitty place, know anything about VR. So that I was really grateful to my school for bringing somebody in to talk to me. These plans can include a variety of different things, like I'm talking about your transition IEP, like learning about organization, communication, daily living, the transportation I was talking about. Those are all things that you're going to need to have a successful transition. So those are all things that the school can teach you about and that you can have built into the plan. I know that we don't have a lot of young folks in the room, but for the ones that we do, and even for the parents, having your child involved in the process is so important, so that their wants and their desires, those choices I was talking about, that self-determination, can be brought up, so that they can tell you what it is I want to do with my future. I want to kind of briefly tell you the story. It was a story of this little girl. And this little girl, she had all these people around her who kept making all these decisions for her. And they kept saying, no, 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 you can't do that. All that was ever heard was negatives. You're not going to go anywhere. And teachers that would say, I'm sorry, are you sure that you belong here? Because I really don't think that you belong in this classroom. And the little girl was sad, and she kept all that stuff inside, and she didn't really, get an opportunity to express herself. And, so everybody around her made all of these decisions. Now, in her case, she sort of went into herself and she said, I know that these are the decisions and the things that you want for me, but what I want for me is beyond the expectations that you have for me. I want you to have higher expectations for me, and I'm going to do more. And so she spent her nights studying and working because she wanted more. Because what she wanted was to rise above the poverty that she lived in, to rise above the homelessness that she had faced, to rise above all of that, to be more successful. So we need to ask our kids what is going on in here and what's going on in here to make what they want important so that they are not sad like that little girl or working all alone to try and make goals. Because we can hold their hand and we can help them to get to the goals that they want. But we need to know what they want. Because those choices are important. And remember what I said earlier. 80% of people who are highly self-determined are employed. And you can look that up. It's in a link that I also have in the presentation. It's from the National Disability Rights Network and it's called Segregated and Exploited. So you're also going to get to read a little bit about shelter workshops in there as well, or I should say a lot. So here is where my heart is in vocational rehabilitation. If you remember early on, I told you this is my background and my training. Vocational rehabilitation here in Florida, and not everywhere, but here in Florida, it's divided up into two different organizations. The Division of Vocational Rehabilitation and the Division of Blind Services. Please know that if you have a child with a dual disability, they can receive services from both organizations. Do not let them tell you otherwise, because they can't. They just can't provide you the same service, so they can't duplicate. So
Which two agencies?
Division of Blind Services and Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. Both of them have the goal of getting you to employment. Division of Blind Services focuses on just what it says, blind issues, blind, they're going to have, they're going to know about like equipment that might be needed for the blind, accommodations, different things like that. But basically, you have to have a visual impairment in both eyes in order to be able to receive services from that organization. VR covers everybody else, but like I said, again, you can have a dual case with them, so don't let them tell you anything different. And they can both come to your IEP. Remember earlier we talked about WIOA. These are the mandated services that VR must provide you as transition services. These are predominantly provided under their STAR program, which is their transition program. Now, that program you don't necessarily have to go through all the eligibility paperwork and things like that, and you can be directly referred from your school for either one of their programs. But please know that if you want to gain full access to the VR services while you're in high school, you can also do that. You can have a general VR case, that is okay, but then you'll go through all the eligibility, bring in medical records and all that kind of stuff. But these services, guidance and counseling can really help, because sometimes I know that when I was 14, which, you know, you can qualify for these services at 14. So again, do not let them tell you just because you're 14 or just because your child is 14, oh, we can't help you, you gotta wait till you graduate. No, you don't. 14, you can go ahead and get started. And the earlier you get started and get thinking about it, the better. But I know that at 14, I sort of knew what I wanted, had an idea, but you might not always know. And sometimes you think, this is exactly what I want to do. And then you get into college or you get into whatever and you're like, man, this is so not what I want to do. So, which is another beautiful thing that VR can help you with. Because you might go in there and you're like, I want to work in a bank. I know I want to work in a bank. This is what I want to do. I feel it, whatever. They can set you up with a work experience or a job shadow, and you could go in and have that work experience. Sometimes they're paid, sometimes they're not. And you can go see what is it to do a position at a bank. And you might get in there and you're like, this is the best thing ever. This is really what I want to do. Or you might go in there and think, oh, my head is splitting. There's no way I can do this for 30 years. Ugh. You know, and that's okay. Because that is the point of doing that job exploration. You get to figure out, is this the thing I want to do? Is this not the thing I want to do? Maybe it's the thing I want to do, but I want to look at something else because, you know. So that's going to be kind of your work experience. Work readiness training is kind of teaching you all those fluffy skills about employment. Because all of us that are employed know that there are all these other little things that go into having a job that are not just I come in every day and I write my reports or I calculate these numbers over here or whatever the duties of your job are. There's navigating the whole social part of what it is to be at work. There is clocking in every day and knowing that I have to show up on time. There is calling your boss when you get sick so that they know that you're not showing up that day, because just not showing up is not an option. So you can learn about all of those things. You can learn about developing a resume or how to fill out an application, because there's an art to filling out an application. So there's all those different things. And then there's self-advocacy skills. We keep coming back to this. How do I speak up for myself? How can I make my own choices? And how can I make my voice heard? Because my voice is important. So you're going to learn what it takes to have your voice have meaning and how to speak for yourself, how to ask those questions. I know that it seems confusing because this looks just like, the letters look just like what you're getting in school, that IEP. But this is an IPE. It's an individualized plan for employment. And much like your IEP, it lays out the services that you need to get to whatever your employment goal is. This document, much like your IEP, is a fluid document. Meaning, just because you signed on the dotted line and you said, today, I want to be a firefighter, that does not mean that a year from now, you can't come back and say, you know, I really gave it some thought, or we did some work experience and nah. You can change this document. Or if you have a service provider and you get to working with this service provider, and guess what? You and this service provider you just don't see eye to eye. That's okay too, because you can change your service providers, you can add services, take away services, do all of that. So it's a fluid document. It flows, it changes, and there's no problem with that. And one other thing about IEPs, IEPs are IPEs, sorry. Even I get the letters flipped around. Basically, it lays out, like I said, everything. Your services is going to have a specific goal on there. What is the job I want to do or my child wants to do? And again, it's important for them to come in and talk about what they want to do, what kind of job that they want to do. Because at the end of the day, they are the one that has to go to that job every day. And for those of us who have been working a while, we know that there are some days you wake up and you're like, oh, not today. But they're the ones that are going to be going to that job every day. So it's super important that it's their choice and what they want to do. In other words, your VR counselor does not get to look at your child and say, little Johnny, I think that you should go to Publix and mop floors. They don't get to make that determination for you or for your child. You are supposed to work with that counselor and develop your own job goal. What it is you want to do. What are you good at doing? What do you like doing? There may be some tests, assessment. There should be some counseling going on. And heaven forbid, if your counselor should say, nope, this is what you're going to do because I decided, please call us. Because no, they don't get to do that. It is your choice. Yes, question?
What if, like, I have a 21-year-old, he has no clue. He's like, and I don't blame him, I mean,
Right.
but, you know, I changed my career 3 times and I have
Yes.
a great career.
Right.
So, but what do you do with stuff like that? And especially with now with, like, limited time with everything, because he's 21 and, you know.
Okay, so with VR, the age cap on 21 doesn't really apply to VR. It kind of applies to their STAR program, but even if you initially go into the STAR program and receive those transition services, you can convert over to a general VR program.
Yeah.
So then there's no age limit. You can be 80 years old and have a VR case as long as what your end goal is to go to work. And please trust me, as a VR counselor, I had people in their 70s and on up who were still like, you know what, I don't want to sit home. I want to work. And so don't worry about a time limitation. There's not a time limitation.
Well, how do you get them to, you know, how do you find something for them? I mean, we've
Right.
gone through the basic. They didn't have STAR when we started VR,
Right.
so, you know, he's still, I mean, he's in college now, but he's still, you know, and
Right.
VR is only going to pay for that for a certain amount of time, and then, you know, how do
Well,
you
so
help them?
there's a number of things that could be done. I would want to know if the VR counselor has done a vocational assessment with your child. And if they have, all right, well, so after the assessment is over, it shouldn't be just, here's your assessment, figure it out. They should be doing some vocational counseling with you. Here is what all this stuff on this assessment means. Because some of it may seem plain and like, all right, I understand that. And some of it is just gobbledygook if you've not really ever read through one of those reports. So, and just because that report comes back and says, you'll be a really great handyman, that doesn't mean that that's what that your child has to do, by the way. If the thing that your child wants to do is not on that report, that is okay. You don't have to do it just because that's what it says. But another option for VR, especially say for some of our kids who maybe are nonverbal or have a lower reading level or different things, there is an option at VR called the discovery process. It's a long process. It takes about 24 hours to do the test. This is going to be 24 hours, maybe over a 10-ish week period. The evaluator is going to talk to you. They're going to get what information they can from your child. Other people you tell them, whether it's your pastors, their school teacher, people who know your child, so they can figure out what is it that might be good for this person. And then they're going to take that information and come back with some possibilities. It's a much more in-depth process that they're looking at. And Discovery has been really good at taking people that it was initially said, no, this person is never going to work. There's nothing that they can do. This was even the family coming along going, you know what, little Johnny can't do anything. So the evaluator came in. Now, I'm going to give it to you. Maybe on the surface, this doesn't sound like a super impressive job, but this person who wound up in this loved it. So this young man, like I said, everybody thought he can't do anything. The evaluator came in, followed him for like 10 weeks, talked to everybody. What they discovered is that he came home every day from the bus. He went to the freezer, got his frozen pizza, put it on his pan, put it in the oven, whatever, set his timer, took his pizza out, sliced it up, and ate it. They're like, man, there's so many work skills in that. And I know, like I said, maybe it doesn't sound like it. All these little things that maybe you don't think are work skills, they really are. The chores that you have little Johnny do, those are potential work skills. So, see what they do, what things they like and what they don't like. We all know our kids, if they don't like doing a chore, they're going to do it halfway. We know. We can see it. So that's valuable information, because you can tell your VR counselor, no, little Johnny is not going to be a janitor, and let me tell you why. Come to my house and look at my floor. He was supposed to mop it. Did this happen? No. Or it was kind of halfway done. And so in that case, in this other case though, when they found all these different skills, they actually wound up finding this young man a job at a pizza place where he pulls the pizzas out of the oven and slices them up and puts them in the box. And he is as happy as a little old lark because he loves pizza, adores pizza. That is his thing. And so he is so happy. And another young man, once again, everybody said, nope, can't do anything. No, no, no. It was all negative. And then they did this discovery on him. And now he is in kind of what they would call a micro enterprise kind of situation. VR wound up sponsoring him for a business. He loves music, has all these gigantic speakers, all his whatever turntables, I don't know. And so now he has a DJ business. And he goes and he does weddings and bar mitzvahs and all of this. And it's his little micro business that VR set him up in. So that's another possibility too, is looking at these little micro enterprises. And so that might be something. Or another one that I read about, now this isn't here in Florida, but this was somewhere else. This young woman loved coffee. She wanted to have her own little coffee place, but it was super expensive to set up. Same city, there was a woman that owned a bookstore, and she kind of wanted to put a coffee bar in her bookstore because she figured, you come in, you have a coffee, you read a book, whatever. So VR worked with this business owner to give a little section of the bookstore to the young lady that wanted the coffee shop. And so she has, and VR purchased all the equipment. So now she has her little coffee shop in the corner of this bookstore. Works out great for the bookstore owner because people come in because they want coffee. And they're also like, oh, you sell magazines and newspapers and stuff. Great. And so it works out. So it becomes what we call customized employment. So there are a variety of different options. It doesn't have to look like traditional 8 to 5, punching the clock, whatever. It can be different and customized. It's all individual. So it's why it's an individualized plan for employment. What do you want to do? What do you want to get to? And so I know that was kind of a roundabout answer, but there are a variety of different ways that VR can analyze and look at what might be good options. And like I said, should be providing that guidance and counseling. It shouldn't just be, well, this test said, so this is what you're going to do. It should be a conversation. What is it that you like? I mean, because let's say, for instance, okay, you can look at me, you're not putting me outdoors. I mean, let's think about that for a minute. The sun is going to come out and I'm going to fry and be just this little pile of ash because I'm just not an outdoors person. It doesn't work for me. So I would need an indoor job. Or just if you don't like the outdoors, why would you want to take somebody who doesn't like the outdoors and go, landscaping, that seems like a really great job for you because we can train you to do the repetitive work. They're not going to do it. They're going to wind it back in VR, just quitting the job because they don't like to be outside. That's what I'm saying. It should be a conversation. What is it that you like to do? What is it you are good at? What barriers might you have to this? Because there might be an accommodation that can overcome that barrier. But these are just, like, what I've got here now are samples of services they might provide. And supported employment is a really important one, because this one is going to make sure that they have supports for up to 24 months. And gives you time to maybe get outside supports from APD for like a job coach or something of that nature. So you're going to have those inbuilt supports to come in and maybe teach you how to do the job, or, you know, remind you that, hey, it's break time or whatever. And then what happens with that job coach is, all right, so they're there a lot at first, right? You know, maybe every day. And then once little Johnny really starts getting into the rhythm of it, job coach steps back and is only there a couple of days a week. And then little Johnny gets really good at it and job coach steps back again, until either the job coach is only there maybe to follow along and make sure everything's going right, or it's possible even that little Johnny could get so good at it that job coach gets to go away altogether. The other thing to know about VR is even when your case is closed, it's not closed, because for at least 3 to 5 years after a case is closed, you can come back and say, you know what, we kind of need that job coach again because we got this new supervisor maybe, and they're wanting us to do some new stuff, or there's been some changes and kind of the job is sort of wobbly, you know. And so then VR can come in and provide, you know, services for a brief time and maybe get that job coach back in there to sort of stabilize that employment again. So even if VR, you know, like I said, they're going to close the case eventually once you have stable employment, you're on your job. For anybody who isn't doing supported employment, that's going to be 90 days. For supported employment, it's going to be up to 24 months.
Is there an alternative agency to DVR?
Not, well, to a degree, yes. There are things out there called employment networks. And if you have Social Security benefits and you have what's called a ticket to work, you can give your ticket to an employment network. If, however, you are having difficulty with vocational rehabilitation and they're not providing services appropriately, you can come to Disability Rights Florida and we can help you with that through our client assistance program, which I was actually going to get to in a couple of slides. So don't necessarily let VR not providing those services appropriately deter you from utilizing those services, because we can help get you back on track with that.
Okay, great, thank you.
So this is what I was saying, the client assistance program. This is one of our 9 federal grants. This is one of the programs that I work under. Client assistance program does assist you with Division of Blind Services or DVR, some of the lighthouses for the blind, and a couple of different entities. And we can also give you some guidance on like what we call Title I ADA issues. So not necessarily so much come in to do the accommodations, but can kind of tell you what some of your protections are. So in the instance of working with VR, let's say you come to us with an issue. My counselor isn't calling me. My counselor has not called me in 6 months, and I don't know what happened to my case. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to first get a little bit more information from you about what happened. Tell us your side of the story. Then I'm going to have you sign what's called an advocate services agreement and a release of information, because with that release of information, I can get your VR file and I can look through that and investigate the issue. See if I can figure out what happened. Because we all know that a variety of things could have happened. It could have been that that VR counselor left and nobody at VR decided that it was a good idea to tell you, which we all know is not a good idea, but that could have been what happened. Or it could have been that they just lost contact. I will say, as a VR counselor, the statistic that pretty much, I would say, ruled my world was 80% of my time was dominated by 20% of my caseload. And that is because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so, you know, you have that 20% of the folks that are super active and they're calling you all the time. And there were a couple of times when I didn't want to, but I had to say, you know, we really need to go on a calling schedule, because if you call me 5 times a day, I'm never going to be able to get done what you're asking me to get done, because every time you call me, I have to document what you're calling me about. So, you know, we kind of made an agreement. But what I'm saying is that, you know, say in that instance where maybe a counselor hasn't called you in 6 months, we figure out what the root cause of that is, and we can either, you know, put you back in contact with that counselor, or we can ask the supervisor to transfer you to another counselor. So there's a variety of different resolutions that can be come up with. And so we're going to work with you. We're going to work with VR to try and come up with a resolution to your problem. And what we're going to try and do is just resolve that on the lowest level possible, you know, first.
Last year, I was notified that it's now family's responsibility to get up with a VR every month.
A counselor has to maintain contact with you. It is as much their responsibility as it is the client's responsibility. VR has to have contact with their clients at minimum once every 60 days. And they have an alert that comes up in their system that says, hey, you haven't talked to little Johnny in 60 days. It might be a really good idea if, you know, you called or sent a letter or did something. So, no, that's, I would say give us a call if that is a problem, because no, the phone goes both ways. They have as much responsibility to contact you as you have them.
I have the same problem, and I feel like they didn't understand. I'm like, you don't understand my child's disability if you expect him to be the one to pick up the phone and call you guys.
I have the same thing. Yeah.
So here's the thing too. Once your child becomes 18, they become an adult, and unless you have guardianship, VR is going to expect that your child is going to pick up that case and run with it. And I know that that's a hard thing, but if you have guardianship, then you need to let VR know. Or VR has the possibility of something that's called an authorized representative. Basically, you can act as that child's representative, but they have to sign a piece of paper saying that you're allowed to be their representative. At the end of the day, they still need to be making their own choices in the case, but you can be the one that calls and does some representation for them. So that's one option that you could take. And like I said, if you're having problems with VR, please, by all means, you know, give us a call. And I know we're coming up on our time, so I'm going to jump here. You also have the Agency for Persons with Disabilities can help you, not necessarily with employment stuff, although they can do the follow along to the supported employment as well as those stuff. So what I wanted to get to kind of really quickly, life after high school, because these are some services or things that you can do. You can do on-the-job training, and that can be done through VR. You can do vocational technical school. You can do college. Those are all possible. Accommodations at the college level can look very much like those accommodations that you get in high school, but you do need to contact the Office of Disability Services. Again, on the sheltered workshop, I know we talked about this earlier, but I really kind of wanted to bring it back around to this again, because these are some things that you need to know. They can pay sub-minimum wages, meaning that in some instances it has been found that there have been people working in sheltered workshops who have been making as low as 2 cents an hour. Meanwhile, their CEOs are making $2 million a year. So this is something to think about. And there's a link at the bottom of your PowerPoint. There's a movie called Bottom Dollars. It's produced by a group called Rooted in Rights. Check that out. That's also where a lot of this information came from. You're going to have limited access to health care benefits because unlike other employers, since you're making some minimum wage, you are not going to get those benefits. It is not going to be you get a health insurance plan. And remember what the large salary gap I was talking about? You're going to have limited contact with those without disabilities. So right now, your child may be in a situation where they are in a least restrictive environment. They're having contact with their non-disabled peers. In a sheltered workshop, that may not be the case, or they may have be limited to contact with their supervisors only, or things of that. And there's going to be limited chance for advancement. So, as I started out this whole thing, yes, competitive employment is possible. Just being prepared ahead of time. Going through school. You can, and this is what we were talking about earlier, having those assessments and kind of figuring out what it is you want to do. So that's one. Figuring out what your aptitudes are, figuring out what your interests are, so that you actually like the job that you go do every day. There are accommodations that you can get, and we'd already talked about supported employment and customized employment earlier. Reasonable accommodations. These are modifications that can be done during any process, a part of the employment process, from application all the way to post offer. These are modifications made to the process or the way in which you do a job. Just because you are hired to do a job, it is more about not just what you do, but kind of how you do it. So if you can still enter or copy, let's say for instance, you're a data entry clerk and your job is to put in all this data, it doesn't matter how you get into the system so much as that you get it into the system. So even if you have to do that with like a Dragon Naturally Speaking or something, that could be an accommodation. So yes, you do need to tell your employer if you need an accommodation. And yes, you are entitled to the same salary as your non-disabled peers. So you should be getting paid, the same as everybody else. And this was the other stuff that I talked about earlier, having the 24 months of supported employment and things like that. So I kind of jumped ahead a little bit. And like I said, there's like 2 slides of references. So I wanted you to have plenty of information that you could check out and be able to make some really good choices. And like I said, just know that employment is possible. So that's it. And if you have any remaining questions, you're free to ask them, and I'm happy to stay as long as you want to ask questions, because I don't think anybody else has this room. So,
Thank you.
okay, you're welcome.